Right, thank you very much, and good morning. My name is Councillor Darren Sanders. I'm the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness, and welcome to my latest decision-making meeting. Before I begin, I'm under orders to do some housekeeping notices, which is that if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room, public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble in the turning circle at the end of King Henry Street past the University Park building. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. As far as web streaming is concerned, I've got to draw everyone's attention to the fact this meeting is being live streamed. Everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly they do not wish to be recorded. Is there anybody who does not wish to be recorded, by the way? No. Okay. Please, can everyone use the microphones, and remember to switch them off when they have finished. So I'm going to try and introduce everybody first, and then because we've got some new people here, I'm going to try and explain the rules of the meeting, if that's all right with you. So I'll start over there. Hello.
Alison Harper, Democratic Services.
Thank you, Alison.
Councillor George, Management of Paul's Grove Ward and Opposition for Housing and Homelessness.
Thank you.
Steve Groves, Head of Building Maintenance.
Gareth Williams, Energy Manager.
Meredith Hughes, Assistant Director, Buildings.
James Hill, Director of Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Alan Denford, Group Accountant for the Housing Revenue Account.
Claire Hardwick, Head of Private Sector Housing.
Mark Fitch, Head of Local Authority Housing.
Nicola Clanahan, Head of Housing Community Services.
Sue Robb, just resident participation.
Sue Golden, resident of Wimpole.
Maria Cole, Residents Consortium.
Cal Corkery, now Independent Councillor for Charles Dickens Ward.
Thank you, Cal. I'll come back to your status in a bit, just to explain to people. Daniel?
Councillor Daniel Weems, Conservative for Hilsey.
Thank you.
Paul Godier, Opinionated Resident.
There's nothing you can say after that, really. Hello, you've moved from the cheap seats. Hello.
Yeah, sorry,
no need to apologise. It's all right. It's okay. And thank you, Jason, for coming. We're very grateful to you. I'm not going to ask for the two people who remain in the cheap seats. So you could be anonymous for the time being. Now, the bad news, colleagues, is in about 15 to 20 minutes, a primary school has been invited in by the Lord Mayor to observe this meeting. So could everyone be on their best behaviour? Sorry. Okay. We've got various new people going through, so I'll just explain how this meeting works and constitutionally what we do. In theory, this is my meeting. In theory, I could do what I like, but I choose not to, because I'm very keen to listen to people and to try and see what we're doing, okay? Hello. Oh, I forgot you. I'm sorry. I'm in the dock already. Please use your microphone, my friend. Okay. It took 7 minutes for me to be in the dock. So we'll go through everything when we start. We've got an agenda, but I want to try and make sure that we do right by as many people as possible. Okay. Now, I'm going to say, are there any apologies for absence? Okay. We're in a very odd situation because, as Cal has outlined, he is currently an independent councillor. What normally happens is that all councillors are told, as you may have heard, Councillor Corkery has been kicked out of the Labour Party, there is no Labour spokesperson for housing. We've not been notified of anyone. But Cal has asked to come along as a ward councillor for Charles Dickens and has come up with some ideas which we shall return to during the meeting. So thank you very much for coming, Cal. It means that you now qualify as a deputy, but that should be fine. So what I'm proposing to do before I begin is to ask two things. Firstly, do any of the councillors here have any interests to declare? Cal?
Personal interest in that I'm a council tenant.
That's excellent, and if you were still the Labour Party's housing spokesperson, that will matter. But thank you very much for being open and honest about that, Cal. That's very kind of you. What I'm proposing to do, if that's all right, colleagues, is to take Paul, Cal, and Jamie's deputations now, so that we have as much time as possible to actually discuss what to do and the things they may say. If that's all right, well, it doesn't have to be all right, that's what I want to do. So, in order, Paul, can you go first? Is that all right, Paul?
Certainly, thank you. I'm only coming here as a resident, point out a few things. I'm a little bit nervous because I don't want to be here. I've got enough things on my plate trying to raise a family through the cost of living crisis and this bill that we've all got to. You lot got to balance the budget, we get that. But are you taking into account in March these tenants you're about to hit with a 100% increase in March are about to lose the vouchers that the government have given them? That's a 200% increase potentially in 1 month. Are you considering that everybody's bending over backwards to make budgets at home work? I'm not eating on every day of the week to make my budget work. You know, you take from Peter to give to Paul. That's the way it works. At the moment, you're taking from who? Because we ain't got no money. I ain't joking you. I don't eat 7 days a week. I ain't joking. Some of you know me, I'm an hard worker. Let me point out this. There's a lot of mentions in here about where the money comes from, where it goes. I'm a tenant. I'm going to list 5 things, just my property. Just mine. I'm one. Last 2 years ago, during COVID, I had 5 repairs for an elbow joint under my bath. That included 8 visits. On the 3rd, 4th and 5th repair, it was marked by management what needed repairing because there were fundamental failures there. That was under my bath. My boiler has been repaired in excess in the last 10 years 6 times, and every time it's the same piece that is failing. I get it, you've got a hard budget, and I'll tell you what's wrong with the boilers in my Pacific block. We've got high water pressure coming in, it messes with everything. But the reality is, 6 repairs? How many times have we got to pay for this same repair? Right outside my window. Only a month ago, you guys, we did paid to have the pavement reinstated because of repairs. Here's the funny thing. I've lived in that block, in that flat for 11 years, and I can tell you right now on my children's names, not one resident parks on them pavements, it's all council contractors. So you're parking on them, and then you're repairing them, and then you're parking on them again. Out the front of my block, there's 3 wooden posts to stop people driving across the grass to make a shortcut from the road to the next road. They were installed in about 2012 by council to stop council contractors driving over it. No residents. These are money going out the window. I raised this 2014, 2015, 2016, all around that time when I was a councillor. Never got mentioned. I've raised it several times as a council tenant. It's never got mentioned. That's money out the window every single time a repair gets done. Heating. I have raised this several times. Any of you are welcome to come to my flat. Run your hands around any window, around any external wall, and feel the draft. When we are hit by a southerly wind, it's like living inside a whistle. It's not even draft proof. And you're wondering why we're paying so much. And here's the funny thing. This 100% increase on everybody isn't fair. I don't actually have my heating on. And I'll tell you why. Because residents below me and next to me have it on quite regular. Yeah? You do see people with the windows open and the heat. You can see the heat waves coming out of the window. You need to manage this, not whack us all with 100% increase. You need to work out your tenants. You need to work out in some of them 2-bedroom flats that you're about to hit are families of 5. Struggling, cost of living crisis. We're all doing it. You lot got to run the budget. God, my heart goes out for you. I'm so glad I ain't sitting where you lot are. Unfortunately, I'm struggling to feed me and my kid. You know? We just get through it. I'm going to sit down because it's damn hard at the moment. And you know what's shocking? I am surviving. I'm getting through this. There's people around me. I'm helping out and I'm struggling. You know? And yeah, it's all politics. That party done that party done that. But come on, you're running a budget. Take from Peter to give to Paul, balance that books, because you cannot take what we ain't got. Because the last point I'm going to make, and I'm really sorry I'm raising my voice because this is the truth, I can't afford it. What are you going to do to me and my kid when I can't afford it? When that debt goes up, which I've already got? What are you going to do, evict me? Then house me in a hotel? Then give me another flat? Think of the money. You've got to do this right, gentlemen and ladies. You've got to do this right. We accept increase has got to come. God, we're paying the same bills. But not looking at March and April when you're going to hit us with a 200% increase. I tell you what, start saving money. Stop the council destroying our pavements and our council repairing it. Stop 6 visits for 1 repair. Come to my flat. I ain't joking. Come to me right now and check the drafts. Yeah? Save us some money. And then we might not be worried about us when you increase this by 100%. Because I tell you what, I've got no money. And I really ain't the one who's struggling the most. That is all I've got to say. Sorry about the emotion, but really, there are people struggling far worse than I am right now. Thank you very much for your time.
Paul, thank you very much. I don't think anyone at all doubts anyone's sincerity in the nightmare that we are facing and the nightmare before anyone today. So if you think we are, you're not. There are Paul, if that's okay, if there are individual issues people have, and you raised 4 or 5 of them, please feel free to raise them with the team directly. I know you have before, but for anyone else, please raise them directly with the team, okay? Hello, you over there in the beanie. Is that Jamie?
No, this
Jason.
is my son, Jason.
Oh, you're the
This
dad.
is my stepfather, who I was here to represent.
Okay, well, I'm so pleased you talked to your stepfather. That's good news. Thank you very much for taking the time to come, sir. We're very, very grateful. Please feel free to use a mask if you wish within this meeting. And no one's going to censor you or cancel you here. Okay? So thank you for that. Jamie, on behalf of your dad.
Jason.
Jason!
That's
I knew
okay.
it was one of the two. We've got a Jamie who's meant to come and just isn't here at the moment.
That's
Jason,
okay.
feel free. Thank you for taking the time to come here.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm here on behalf of my mum and my stepdad, of residents of Pitwick House. Yeah, about the 100% increase, I understand you've got to raise it at some point, you know, because there's costs of maintenance and things like that. But I'm a former employee of Vital Energy. We installed the system in Buckland and the sports centre alongside other contractors, and I was under the understanding that the system produces a certain amount of excess energy which you sell back to the national grid. This was before all the solar panels were installed, so I'm assuming the solar power panels are connected to the same system. So I'm a little baffled as to why there's a 100% increase when the system is apparently supposed to be generating excess energy that you're selling back, or what the council is selling back to the national grid. Now, I know that my parents are on, I forgot what you call it, pensions, on pensions, and I'd say they're just floating, you know. Yeah, this 100% is definitely going to impact them. I understand it's going to impact probably other people a lot more who are living on their own on just one pension, and yeah, I just don't see how 100% increase can be justified based on those facts. Is that okay?
Feel free, sir.
Yeah.
You're the resident,
I
not
apologise to the
son.
council for coming in early, but I've got an elderly mum I have to look after to make sure she's all right before I leave home. Basically, as far as I understand it, the council are going to be raising the council tax and the rents this year. And then, as that gentleman just quite eloquently put it, if this 100% increase comes in on the heating, it's going to be a hell of a whack. I mean, we are just about, me and my wife are both pensioners, and we're just about covering everything every month. But I should imagine this, and that's going to take our monthly budget right to the edge if this 100% increase comes in. And I'm sure this gentleman over here has said the same thing. There are people out there who just will not be able to afford this. Now, I know there's an energy crisis, and I'm a reader of Private Eye, and I know there's lots of local councils all over Britain that are either going bankrupt or are struggling on the edge of their budgets. But I can understand a 50% increase, but not a 100% increase. So, you know, I'm imploring the local council if they can look at this again. I mean, as that gentleman said, every council building in Portsmouth has got defects. Because of the age, you can't replace housing stock. We understand that. But as that gentleman quite rightly pointed out, in our block, our north wall is permanently damp. I have to pay out every month for 6 gel boxes to go along the north wall to take the moisture out of the flat because we had a hell of a damp problem. And every month they're all filled up, all 6 are filled up. So, as I said earlier, listening to this gentleman when I came in, he's right what he says. Every council building in Portsmouth has got defects. And people are struggling, and people know they can't get a new flat. If you ask the council for a flat, you're more likely to say you'll be on a waiting list, if you're lucky. I mean, there's about 7,000 or 8,000 people waiting for housing in Portsmouth, and that in itself is difficult. I mean, the council, I've lived here all my life, the population in Portsmouth has gone from 196,000 people just after the war to 250,000, probably more like 270,000 people. And they're all struggling for places to live, and you've got to, instead of building out, you've got to keep building up. The trouble is, because of the speed at which they're building, the places themselves have got defects. This gentleman here says he's got cracks in the wall which lead to drafts. We've got damp. We have to have the heating on, and if you're on the 10th floor facing northeast, in the winter, it really gets cold. Believe me, it gets cold, and you've got to put the heating on. So, again, we can understand the rise, but 100%. It's just I think it's just way too much. 50% maybe, but not 100%. As my stepson just said, he worked with the group that installed the heating, and we was under the impression that some of that heating would be sold back to the national grid. So, unless this is the private company somewhere is pushing to increase their profits, which a lot of companies seem to be doing, they're using this post-pandemic era, like Shell this morning, to push up their profit margins and putting councils to the sword in order to gain that money. So I really think sometimes there should be a bit of a pushback from the council. 50%, yeah, but not 100% increase. So that gentleman just said, we're lucky, we're just about keeping things together financially, just about. But as that gentleman quite rightly put, there's a lot of one-parent families in this city, and they are going to the wall because of the amount of money they've got to find every month to pay bills. Thank you very much for listening.
Not at all. Thank you very much. If you want to get back to your good wife, do so any time. Okay? I encourage discussion here, even with things I may disagree with. I don't mind. Just a couple of points of fact, if that's all right, which aren't correct. It's understandable you think that way. Don't worry, you're not the only one. But there are 2 things. One, there's about how many Portsmouth people are on our waiting list, James? Is it about Portsmouth people, not people in Havant? It's around 1,500, is it?
Approximately applicants, not necessarily the number of people, but applicants, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I understand why you think that. That's not a problem. Many people do. And the other one is the recent census population does not have the population of Portsmouth at 250,000. It's a bit lower than that, but again, the sentiment behind that is a sentiment many people feel and share. Okay? But I'm very grateful to you, and feel free to go at any time. Okay? Thank you very much for that, both of you. Cal.
Thank you, Darren. Just continuing the theme of hearing from the residents and the people that are directly impacted by this, I've been contacted by a number of people, and I've been out to speak to people and kind of make people aware of what the situation is. There's a number of people who, through various reasons of work, disability, childcare, haven't been able to come along today themselves, but have sent me a few short comments, which I'd like to read out just before I go into the ideas that I've got, if that's okay. So the first person says, I'm a resident of Copperfield House and a pensioner. If and when these new charges come into effect, that means it will be approximately 10% of my monthly income, as I only get the state pension. I know energy prices have risen drastically in the last year, and everyone who is eligible have been getting help with their energy bills, but once these measures end, I will find it a struggle, as having an electric cooker will make my electricity bill higher, which will average around £60 a month, or 7% of my income. So hopefully the people who make this decision on these price rises for heating realise the hardship this will cause for myself and others in this situation. The next person says, I live in a one-bedroom flat in Copperfield House and pay approx £42 per month, roughly £10 a week. So by reading the article in House Talk, it reads that, like, my charge will increase to £29.30 a week, approximately £120 a month, roughly a 200% increase. Yesterday, 31st of the 1st 23, I phoned the Buckland Housing Office because I am so worried I simply cannot afford it. The woman I spoke to didn't know anything about the price increase and said she would get my housing officer to phone me. The housing officer didn't phone back, but the original woman did, and said she spoke to the housing officer, who told her that they didn't know anything about the article in the House Talk magazine, and yes, there will be an increase, but they can't tell me because it's confidential at the moment. Then, as luck would have it, I received your letter through my door yesterday evening. It says that my one-bedroom flat will receive a 100% increase to £82.88 a month, so you must have more knowledge than the Buckland Housing Office. A 100% increase is still absolutely ludicrous, and how they expect us residents to find that extra money is beyond me. The next person says, based on your information, I've calculated the rent for my two-bedroom flat in Barkis House will increase to £608 per calendar month. That is an increase from £500 per calendar month. I am frustrated that I have no control over how much heating or hot water I use. I find that other than hot water usage, the heating in the block is unbearably hot. In order to reduce energy bills, electricity, I am able to adapt usage. However, the heating hot water, I am not. I find I am paying for something I am not using. In terms of this increase, I will need to cut down on food in order to pay the increased charges. My personal circumstances are such that I am not in receipt of in-work benefits, so I have to find the money from salary along with millions of others. In order to manage my outgoings, the only option left is to reduce my food bill. Is there another way of supplying heating or hot water which gives control back to the tenant? The next person says, I am unable to attend the meeting, but if possible, I'd like the following points raised. 1. In respect of my own block, Brisbane House, I can recall at least 12 days over the past year where the water supply and heating was switched off completely. How, when the council are unable to provide the service we are paying for, can they justify any increase, let alone one of 100%? Their second point is the wholesale of gas is getting lower all the time and now below the prices prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Again, with the wholesale price lowering, how can the council justify any increase? And their third point, if the issue is the amount the National Grid are paying for the surplus energy created and sold back to it for, not what the council have agreed or expected, why should it be the block residents' responsibility to make up the shortfall? The next person says, I would like to raise a concern. I have lived in my two-bedroom flat for 1.5 years and I already had an annual increase in my rent and service charge, which I would expect it to go up again in April 2023. With the current inflation to fuel, electricity, food and council tax, we as a working couple who receive no benefits from the government are already struggling financially to survive without being in debt due to consistent lending to keep food in our home. If I am struggling when I work full-time and my wife works part-time due to childcare arrangements, how will this affect us and those who are unemployed or vulnerable? Given the fact we are unable to turn on or off our heating, I think this would be unfair as we will be forced to pay a considerable amount more for something we may not use often. I therefore urge you to put a plan in place to protect us from this, as an extra £53.69 per month will put us further into financial hardship and cause undue stress, and that can affect our mental health. And lastly, in terms of residents, I've got a text message from someone who says, I will not be paying that charge throughout the year, especially with most of the year I don't use my heating. The council at this precise moment should be ashamed of this decision. Life is hard, and it is just that they want to make things harder. Feel free to use this at meeting, but I will not be paying this full price throughout the year. When changes are made, they can take me to court. So that's just a few kind of extra bits of feedback from residents. Now I've got some ideas I'd like to put forward in terms of some alternative suggestions for the budget. So I just wanted to start firstly by thanking all the residents that have come along today and all the residents that I've spoken to over the last week or two about this. I think it's really important that at meetings like this, as well as having the kind of expert input from council officers and input from councillors, it's really important that we hear directly from council tenants and leaseholders. I know we're lucky enough to have people from the Resident Consortium attend on a regular basis, but it's good to see even more people engaged in this particular meeting. So as one of the councillors for by far the poorest ward in our city, I am here to put forward a number of practical measures which could be taken to address poverty and hardship in our area when you decide the council housing budget today. Nearly 70% of residents in Charles Dickens ward live in social housing, and the vast majority of those are council tenants. During this unprecedented cost of living crisis, it is vital the council does all it can to support the poorest and most vulnerable. I have set out below proposals which would see millions of pounds put back into the pockets of council tenants in Charles Dickens ward and across the rest of the city. I'm asking that you consider freezing council rents for the coming year, set up a financial hardship fund for council tenants, and reduce the proposed increase in energy charges. So firstly, in terms of a rent freeze, the proposed rent increase of 7% would mean the average council tenant pays £322 more in rent over the coming year, with some households facing increases of up to £695. This is simply unaffordable for many households in our area, already struggling to get by on low incomes. Instead, I'm asking you to implement a rent freeze, meaning no council tenant pays any more in rents this coming year than they did this last year. This would result in around £5.7 million less in income through rents in 2023-24, which may sound a lot until you consider there's over £22 million of reserves held in the housing revenue account. The purpose of reserves is to meet short-term and emergency financial requirements. I believe it is clear the cost of living crisis facing council tenants meets this definition. Secondly, in terms of financial hardship funds, as well as rent, council tenants have many other bills rising and that they've got to meet at a time when their incomes and wages are falling. On a daily basis, we support households in Charles Dickens ward who were struggling to get by well before the cost of living crisis and who are now experiencing incredibly severe financial hardship. I've lost count of the number of times I've walked into the flat of a council tenant in our area to see they've been unable to put down proper flooring, purchase white goods or decorate to a basic standard. Surely all these are minimum expectations people should have in terms of making their property a livable and comfortable place to call home. Many other social landlords have hardship funds in place, funded through rents, so that tenants can access funding to bring their living conditions up to a basic minimum standard. You will be aware that over the past few years, I have repeatedly asked Portsmouth City Council to set up such a hardship fund for its council housing tenants. Unfortunately, that has not yet happened, but now is the time. And lastly, in terms of energy charges, there are a number of blocks within Charles Dickens ward where the council provides the energy or heating to tenants and then charges them for the service. The proposal within the report going to this meeting is to increase those energy charges by up to 100% or £755 a year for some households. We know domestic energy prices have increased significantly of late, but also that costs are expected to fall significantly in the coming year. Commercial energy providers have exploited the situation to ramp up bills for consumers, but public sector organisations should consider alternative approaches. For example, given energy costs are widely expected to fall significantly in coming years, the council could choose to smooth out those costs passed on to tenants by averaging out expected charges over a number of years. This would mean bringing in the same level of income from energy charges, but over a longer period, giving households more of a chance to deal with their short-term financial pressures. On this basis, I would like you to consider limiting the energy cost uplift to any council tenant whose electricity and or heating is provided by the council to 50% in the coming year, with any additional costs spread out over future periods. This could save some council tenants living in our ward up to £377 in the coming year. I'd also like to point out that these proposed costs seem to be out of kilter what people would pay if they were receiving gas through their own metered supply. And I'm basing that on the fact that it's widely reported and seems to be accepted, and people can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the average expected gas usage for a two-bed flat is 8,000 kilowatt hours per year. The current price cap for domestic energy supply is 10p per kilowatt hour and 28p per day standing charge, which would result in a £902 a year charge for gas to the average using households, which equates to £75 a month for a two-bed property, which is clearly a lot less than it's being proposed the council would charge to people living in the Dickens blocks. I think, just to conclude, these reasonable proposals would have a significant and positive impact on the household finances of many council tenants in Charles Dickens wards and indeed across the city. I would like to take these points into account and trust you will give them due consideration as part of the decision today. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. Thank you for sending those to me. They have been considered, and I'm sure they will form part of a discussion later on. So very grateful to you for coming. And thank you to all the deputies for coming. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for a little, we'll just discuss for a little while some other things that are on here, which may be slightly less contentious, before we get to the rent setting bit, if that's okay. And my friend, please feel free to go at any time, okay? I'm going to move to something slightly different, which is the item 3 on the agenda, which is the Park Homes pitch fee review. Claire.
Thank you. So the purpose of the report is to present the options and agree the approach that will be applied to the upcoming annual pitch fee review process for April 23. Portsmouth City Council is the landowner of 2 residential park home sites, Cliffdale Gardens and Henderson Park. The residents of the sites are private owner-occupiers who own their private mobile homes and rent their plots from the local authority for a weekly charge. The pitch fee is a rental charge applied to park home residents to allow them to keep their mobile homes on the site. The fee allows the council, as the site owner, to cover the costs of managing the site, including repairs and maintenance, as well as to generate a surplus which contributes to the council's general fund. The pitch fee can be increased by up to the retail price index, often referred to as RPI, each year, as well as to recover the recovery of certain costs related to improvements to the site. So this means that the pitch fee must cover the cost of managing the site, including all repairs and maintenance of the existing facilities. The pitch fee should be reviewed annually at the review date, which is a specified date in the pitch agreement. So for Cliffdale Gardens and Henderson Park, this review date was set as the 1st of April 2023 for this year. The fee has historically increased each year for both sites in line with RPI. However, in January of last year, the resale price index was actually 7.8%, which was higher than had been in previous years. So the local authority made the decision at that point to increase the pitch fee by 3% from April 2022, instead of the national RPI rate of 7.8%. So from this pitch fee review, the RPI is calculated using the last figure that was published 28 days before the review date. This year, the RPI for January will not be published until the 15th of February this year. Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness is now asked to consider the options presented in the report to agree what the approach will be in applying the RPI to the pitch fee. So there are 2 options presented. Option 1 is to increase the pitch fee by 6% for 2023. This level of increase would be in line with the increase in costs for the local authority, but obviously lower than what we expect RPI will be for this year. Option 2 is to increase the pitch fee by RPI for 2023, which is the presumed increase each year. At the time of writing the report, the RPI figure for January is unknown, but it's expected to be in the region of around 15% based on recent monthly RPI rates. Therefore, to summarise, the recommendations in the report are for the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness to take note of the recommendations and agree to either option 1, which is to increase the the pitch fee reviews fee by 6% from the 1st of April, or option 2 is to increase the pitch fees by the retail price index, which will be published on the 15th of February this year.
Okay, thank you for that, Claire. For new people, what I do is I ask the Residents' Consortium first for their opinions as their residents, and then I go to my opposition political spokespeople, who this morning are Daniel and George, and then I sum up. Okay? Maria.
Very sorry, Chair, but the 4 representatives of the Residents' Consortium had not received any paperwork as of this morning. Alison has managed to give a couple of us spare copies, but we still haven't had time to actually go through the reports.
There are 2 words for that, Maria: unacceptable, frankly, and I'll be raising this later. And I apologise for this. But feel free to make any comments you feel you can make within the confines of all this, and I will deal with them later. Okay? Sue? No? Okay, that's fine. I'm sorry about this. As I said, this will be dealt with later with people who are not the housing team. You're up. No, I fully understand, my love. Luckily, with the rent setting bit, which we're going to come to later, you have had presentations and stuff like that, so hopefully there'll be some help. But I'll carry on asking. Okay? Daniel.
It seems to be pick one option over the other, where 6% seems quite reasonable versus what the expected RPI is going to be. In the very unlikely event that it's lower than 6%, would there be any room for manoeuvre to put the setting to that place? I know it's very unlikely, but I thought I'd raise that. And another point I wanted to raise for the people who are in Cliffdale Gardens and indeed Henderson Park, where they've had some negative press about having, obviously when they sell their homes, the council taking some money off of them. I just wanted to know if there's any discretionary funding available for those who may be struggling a little bit more than others.
Okay, thank you for that, Daniel. I'll come back to I'll ask officers to respond to those points after George has gone. Is that all right? George.
Thank you, Darren. When we talk about numbers, firstly, can we put the numbers into a financial context? When you say 6%, what is 6%? So give me a figure, because I like to talk numbers.
I think what George is talking about is how many pounds and pence, really, isn't it? Because we've talked
basically,
about
yeah. I mean, you know,
right?
it's a say. I mean, I'll hold my hands up and say that I don't know much about the park home situation, other than obviously the pitchforks that were out last year after we made our last decision. And I think that we should probably be very conscious of decisions that we can make that impact such a large community within a small area. There's a big difference between 6% and 15%. So if 6% was of £100, it's £6. If it's not, it's 15. You know, so there's big disparities there. So if we can just get the figures in public, that'd be great. So
in the report, under section 7, it actually gives an outline of what that increase looks like. So for the 6% increase for a small plot, that represents £2.13 per week increase. Or for a double plot, which is the largest type of plot, £2.67 per week. In contrast, for the 15, what we project could be up to 15%, for a small plot would represent £5.31 per week. For a double plot, £6.67 per week.
Wonderful. So with that in mind, Darren, I don't think massively the 6% would be unreasonable. I think £2 odd a week is more than suffice. But I kind of echo what Daniel says. I think it would be a good idea to look at the retail price, and then there's one scale. I don't know if you've got the discretionary to, but to fluctuate it within it. I think if you stick at 6% and then it comes out the report, it's a shame that we're not having the meeting in 2 weeks' time, isn't it, really? But, you know, if it comes out and the report says, you know, that it's slightly cheaper, then is there any method of being discretionary and putting it down? Because, it would be wildly unacceptable for it to come out in the unlikely event of being, say, 4%, and then we've put 6% on there for no reason. I know it's a decision you're going to have to make, Darren, but yeah.
Thanks for that, George. Claire, with regards to Daniel's points, I mean, as far as I can see, no one really knows what inflation is going to look like. I think the government is hoping that it's going to be about 5% by come December, which would suggest a median of 6+. I think that's one of Rishi Sunak's 5 promises, and is the central assumption of the Office for Budget Responsibility. So we're probably looking at about 6%, and this is the retail price index, not the index everyone else uses. So I think it's 5.5% CPI is the central assumption of the Office for Budget Responsibility by the end of the year. So is it likely? I think Daniel is suggesting it might not be likely, but is it likely that inflation rate is going to be below? I mean, we're talking about median inflation rate over a year, aren't we?
So the RPI rate that we should work to under the framework of the legislation is the published RPI rate 28 days before the review date, which is the RPI rate that will be published for January of this year, which we won't know until the 15th of February. For that rate, I think I'm no expert in RPI. I can't profess to be an economics expert, but it seems extremely unlikely that it's going to be lower than the 6%. But the legislation does restrict that anyway, so we wouldn't, unless there's good reason, I think, is the wording of the legislation to go beyond the RPI rate. So if, for example, the RPI rate does end up being 4% for January of this year, we would be working to the RPI rate rather than above it. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and then my second question was just about discretionary funding for those who might be able to not be able to pay the £2.13 per week. So I know there's a few people who, naturally send other residents where that £8 a month is massive for them. So I just wanted to know if there's any way we can support them as residents.
So we don't have a specific discretionary fund, but the officers do work closely with residents. If there's any issues around payments of their rents, they will go through all due diligence to try and put them in touch with any additional funding that they are not currently accessing that they could be, and any support that's possibly available for them for that.
Perfect. And I've got one which isn't in the report, but it's something from my casework through my employer. I just wanted to know where we were, seeing as everyone's here. There were some issues where the landlord, the third party, wasn't transferring over the energy grants. So I just wanted to know what work's been done on that to make sure that all the money that's coming from central government isn't going straight to the landlord, it's then getting passed over to the tenant. I don't know if you've got an update. Sorry, it's just something that's just popped up in my head.
Sorry, Councillor Weems. There was an announcement just after Christmas by government to ensure that landlords have done that. We've been contacted because of the district heating system networks that we've got, and suffice to say that the charges that we levied on residents last year were significantly lower than the business cap that was brought in by government during the summer. So we'll be writing to residents in those areas shortly to advise them this is what's come out of government. This is the information that we've got, and we'll pass it on to the residents. But I can assure you that the charges that we levied this time last year on residents were significantly lower than the business cap that was brought in.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. And just for clarity, your employer is Penny Mordaunt, the Conservative MP for Portsmouth North and Leader of the House of Commons. Just for openness and transparency. Thanks, Daniel. Okay, Maria.
Thank you, Chair. Through what Councillor Weems was saying, it suddenly came into my head. You're talking about rent. Are these homes eligible for housing benefit?
There are some residents who are in receipt of housing benefits.
That's okay. Thank you very much indeed. George very kindly mentioned pitchforks that came my way last year. with regards to this group of tenants, with some justification. Luckily, they're all out my back. But I think the key thing in a lot of this meeting, because it reflects the deputations earlier on, is just trying to mitigate the cost of living crisis for everybody. I think, Maria, one of the problems with people here is they're going to be subject to the massive increases in mortgage rates and in interest rates that have come as a result of tanking the economy. So therefore I have to be very careful. I would love to use the lower CPI level for this group of people, but legally we can't. I take on board Dan's point about discretion and stuff like that, and I think Claire will go away and have a look at that. I also think that despite what George says, which is sort of basically whack 'em for the most amount of money, I think the other aspect, which is that there will be significant increases in mortgage rates coming for most of this year, means that the idea of increasing their charges by 15% is frankly for the birds. Because in order to mitigate the cost of living crisis for as many people as possible, I think the only sensible option is the option to increase it by essentially an average over the year, which I understand the council is using to try and deal with its own costs across the piece, which is 6%. So therefore I am recommending, well, I'm agreeing that we pursue a 6% rise, as 15% frankly ain't on. Particularly for many pensioners. There's a disproportionate number of pensioners in there as well, and that ain't on. So I think that's that done. Next is the private sector housing fees and charges. More pitchforks on the way. Claire.
Thank you. So the purpose of this report is to present the proposals for the private sector housing fee adjustments for charged services to ensure that they achieve cost recovery. So the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness agreed last year on the 22nd of March 22 to amend fees for several of the Council's private sector housing services, which included the Home Improvement Agency service, HMO licensing fees for mandatory HMO licensing, and the housing regulations enforcement fees. It was also agreed at that time that they would be reviewed annually. For the private sector housing and home improvement agency fees, this report outlines that there's no proposed change. That fee is charged on a percentage basis. The other fees are the mandatory HMO licensing fees, houses in multiple occupation. So the Housing Act 2004 makes provision for local authorities to recover their costs associated with the operating of HMO licensing schemes. There isn't an upper limit on the maximum fee that can be charged, but local authorities are not allowed to make a profit, and the fees charged must be reasonable and proportionate. A recent financial review of the costs incurred by the Council in running the mandatory licensing scheme has resulted in the recommendations of this report, which represents an increase of 6% compared to the fees agreed in March of last year. Further to this, the Council's Cabinet made a decision on the 22nd of November 22 to introduce a citywide additional licensing scheme from the 1st of September. This decision included a new approach to licensing, whereby licenses will be awarded for different licensing terms based upon the compliance of the applicant. So Cabinet have instructed officers to present a further report before September of this year with proposals for mandatory HMO licensing to be aligned to this new model. Therefore, the mandatory HMO licensing fee structure will be subject to a full review, and a new proposed licensing fee structure will be presented to Cabinet before September of this year. In essence, what this is saying is that this current proposed 6% increase is in the short term before a full review is being done of the fee structure. And lastly, the private sector housing enforcement charges. So these are charges that are levied to recover expenses that are incurred in serving formal enforcement notices. So this includes improvement notices, prohibition orders, hazard awareness notices and such like, where the council are taking formal enforcement action against landlords or agents. The revised charges also represent an increase of 6% and are based on the full cost to the council of taking the action, including inspections of property, preparation and service of the notice, and they're all detailed within Appendix 2 of the report. So to just summarise, the recommendations of the report are that the Cabinet Member for Housing and Preventing Homelessness approves the proposals for the private sector housing fee adjustments for mandatory licensing, which is outlined in Appendix 1 to the report and commences from the 1st of April this year. And the same for the private sector housing fee adjustments for enforcement fees outlined in Appendix 2 to also commence from the 1st of April this year.
Okay, thanks for that, Claire. I'm going to ask the rest of the consortium for their views, but if for obvious reasons you haven't got any, that's perfectly understandable. I said they'll be dealt with later. George.
For once, I've not really got much to say in relation to this report or to argue with it. I actually quite like this one. The only thing I will say, as a side note, the integrated impact assessment, I don't know if anyone's noticed, but it's suggested that I email Mark Pemberton or Pat Turton if I have any questions, and I'm assuming that if I emailed them that I wouldn't get very far. So maybe we need to, someone needs to make a note so that we update the assessment form. But other than that, no, the report's good.
Thank you, George, for spotting a deliberate mistake there. That was excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Daniel?
I kind of agree with George. I quite like this report, and it obviously came off the back of a lot of pushing and prodding to Darren, which I do appreciate that the licensing structure has been reviewed. I just have a couple of questions really about when a notice is served and the fees associated with it. I just wondered, you quickly touched on it, Claire, where that can you set them to be higher? Is there a way of, for example, let's say I'm a HMO owner and I've had taken emergency remedial action under Section 40 once or twice. Is there a way of kind of staggering it to go higher? So let's say the first instance is £731, but then if I do it again, it can go up to £1,000 and etc. I just want to know if there's a way of actually kind of, if I'm a poor HMO owner and I'm constantly being obviously given notices, I know you can revoke the licence, but I just want there to be a way of actually putting HMO owners off and being poor landlords?
So the enforcement fees that are outlined in the report don't just apply to HMO licence holders, they apply to any enforcement that the team take. But as outlined in our enforcement policy, we have an approach of escalation for enforcement. So if someone is a repeat offender, the charges outlined in this report are only for the recovery of the activity that leads the officer to taking that enforcement action. There are also all sorts of other penalties and punitive action that we take. So we may look to prosecute a landlord for repeat offences, or there, as outlined in our policies, there's lots of situations where we may levy a civil penalty notice, which can be really quite severe actually in terms of the monetary penalty there. It can go up to £30,000 per offence. So this fee is actually only a minor part of the overall enforcement powers that are available. It's just simply the recovery of the costs of the officer taking that initial enforcement action.
Thank you. And I have another question that, again, isn't in the report, but when I was researching it came up. I just wanted to know whether you could send me any information about rent repayment orders for HMO landlords, if you've got any data on that. It doesn't really relate to the report, but while you're here, I just thought I'd ask. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Feel free to ask any questions of any officers at any time. You also, constitutionally, you're allowed briefings as well, so feel free to take that offer up at any time. I know you do. I'm not allowed to know what they are, but I know you do, so feel free to go straight away. Okay, that's lovely. Hello. For those who don't know, we are being greeted by a primary school in the city, who most of you can't see, but I can. So hello. Blimey, you're well trained. You're better than me at Northgate, I tell you honestly. So thank you very much for coming. I've told them all to behave because you're good. All right. So thank you so much for coming. We're very grateful to you. So we're now presented by primary schools. So the very best of order, please. Thank you. A couple of points. Firstly, thank you very much, Claire, for the report. Thank you very much for the favourable comments from Dan and from George. I have to say, Dan, that I know you've written to me more than once about this, and you've been pushing an open door, as you well know. When Liberal Democrats resumed running the city in 2018, we did so on a policy of extending licensing to the whole of the city. That was the then additional licensing scheme, and I'm delighted that we've been finally able to fulfil that after we were told we couldn't pursue the additional licensing scheme because it was working too well. So I'm grateful to you for that. Thank you for your pressure to us on that. That's very grateful. HMO licensing in particular is always a bit contentious, as they more than one landlord has told Claire and me and everyone else that Liberal Democrat policies will mean there are fewer HMOs in the city. Apparently this has led to cheering on the streets of various parts of the city when I keep telling people. So I don't believe it for a second, frankly. But we do have to do right by various people. And so I'm happy with the overall consensus here to go along and accept the two recommendations that you've given us, Claire, and I'm very grateful to you for the clarity with which you've done that, so it's very kind. And if you're not needed, you can leave now if you want.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for coming, school children. They've gone. They clearly had enough. They should come to a full council meeting. That's where the fun starts. I'll tell you. All right. Item number 5: city fibre in council estates. Mairead.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. This is an information-only update report for your good self. And you will recall that in January 21, we presented a paper to Housing Cabinet advising that we'd be working closely with City Fibre through a non-specific wayleave with them in terms of installing full fibre infrastructure to our PCC housing blocks of flats across Portsmouth. This provides then the necessary cabling and full fibre infrastructure that internet service providers and that can link into, ensuring that residents, where they choose to have it, they've got access then to the full fibre platform. This is the second update that I've brought to Housing Cabinet. I brought a similar report in January of last year, and the purpose really of the report is to update on the progress in the last 12 months and to advise of any and to advise of any significant developments during the past 12 months. I think the key things to focus on, and I'd highlight to you, is in item 4.6 of the report, that over the last 12 months we've connected over 283 blocks of flats across Portsmouth to the full fibre network, which has released just under 2,500 individual dwellings, which then are capable of receiving the full fibre. As of tail end of last year, just before Christmas, City Fibre had advised me that 41 new customers had signed up with internet service providers on using that full fibre platform, and those numbers are increasing. In terms of context, that means that since we started the programme in March, April of 2020, 21, over 460 blocks have been completed, and over 4,000 individual flats have had the connection to their front doors, and are now capable of receiving the full fibre platform. In terms of in the future plan, so next year will be the third year of the programme. the plan is to bring on another 2,000 dwellings online and to be enabled then to receive then the uprated system. The other point of note, I think, within the report is item 4.9, which advises that in October of last year, PCC and City Fibre added a supplementary agreement to the original non-exclusive way leave that added in our flats and blocks of flats in the Havant area, including Crookhorn and Weacott Farm, so we could extend that offer out to our residents, our HRA residents that live out in those areas. And we've worked closely with our colleagues in Havant Borough Council in terms of making sure that works that works smoothly. And I think we're due to start completing some of the first properties out in Havant shortly. The overall programme of works to the housing revenue account properties is to be completed by the end of 2024, and that works is in progress concurrently with the works that you'll see happening across the rest of Portsmouth, where City Fibre are installing a full fibre network for the rest of the city. We work closely with City Fibre to ensure that they work in accordance to our necessary specifications and to the high standards that we expect, both in terms of the work they do, but also to minimise disruption to our residents. And we hold quarterly strategic meetings with their senior management team, but also regular operational meetings with their team on the ground. To ensure that any issues that we receive either from residents that might be affected by the work or our own staff are taken on board and improvements are made. And touch wood, the issues that we've had around the installations in our blocks of flats are few and far between. And I think the good working relationship we've got with officers within building services and City Fibre have ensured that disruption is mitigated, etc. I think the only thing I would add is that we're obviously continuing to deliver the programme across the city, and it's the intention to bring another report next year to give you a further update in terms of the progress both on Portsea Island but also within the Havant area, and then perhaps wrap something up in the early part of 2025 where the whole scheme across the city and Havant will be completed.
Thank you for that, Mairead. That's very kind of you. Residents Consortium. People. Sorry, I'm sorry to demean you in that way and dehumanise you by calling you people. But any comments? I mean, has anything been picked up about the overall quality of the work that's been done?
I just wonder why is it, if there's 2,000 people that can now access City Fibre, you've only got 41 people that have actually chosen to do it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Maria. We continue to work with City Fibre. They've got their own promotion and marketing materials to bring people on board, but we've had a number of articles in House Talk highlighting the advantages of the full fibre platform, etc. The local managing director of City Fibre presented at a recent residents consortium about the advantages, etc. And they'll continue to promote that across the across the next 18 months to completion.
Just as part of that, when I switch my computer on, I often get adverts for City Fibre telling me Portsmouth is now covered. So it is going out, I know, to people. Do you think so few people taking up because of the cost? Because we all know that in April, broadband is going to shoot right up. I mean, I may not even be able to afford broadband anymore.
No, I agree, and I know when a regular feedback to City Fibre, both from myself and Councillor Sanders, has fed back to them, and also when we met at the Residents Consortium, one of the key issues that we're concerned about is making sure that there isn't a digital exclusion for people in local authority accommodation. We've put the infrastructure in. and we're working closely with them and their partners really to see what they can do in terms of, are there social tariffs, are there almost like perhaps internet light packages that can be offered, etc., where it may be just an email and a small offer that can be made to make sure that the systems and the packages on offer are affordable for all. But again, it's a marketing, and it's within the gift of City Fibre and their service providers. But certainly myself and my staff will continue to push them hard to make sure that as many residents as possible can join the system.
Okay, I've got you go first, and then I go to Sue. This is all after you, Claude. I like this. No, you have a domestic first. Sort it out.
Yeah, when City Fibre did their presentation to the Residents Consortium, I had a concern then that, would the cost be competitive or would it be out of reach of people? And I think what's worrying is the low numbers that have taken it up so far. So I agree with what's been said. I just hope that going forward, when it's completed, that this doesn't become a white elephant and the residents of Portsmouth don't take it up in the numbers that are required, and especially as we go forward in this recession, which I think 23 is going to be a bad year, I think 24 is going to be just as bad, that all this money's been invested. I mean, it may not be the councils, appreciate that, but it becomes a white elephant.
Thank you for that. I think we'll come back to that, if we may, just in a little while, because there have been discussions around that sort of thing. Right. So very grateful to you for raising that. Sue? Sue, I think, thank you very much for that. No, don't need to apologise. Actually, no, you don't. If you think you do, get out of here now, because you don't. Sue, I'm so pleased you turned your microphone off. Thank you very much, my friend. Now, I think there are some issues that you raised, which I wanted to raise as well, frankly, Sue, in more general terms, which I'll come back to a bit later, but thank you very much for that, Sue. Marej, you sounded incredibly keen to sort of reply to what Sue was saying. Which nice.
I think it was to Sue and also to the resident who asked the question about the take-up, etc. So, firstly, PCC aren't investing any money in this. It's officer time just to work with City Fibre and make sure that the works are happening in compliance with our requirements. So, we're not putting any money into this. And I think the other thing to add is that City Fibre are investing probably 30 plus millions of pounds in City Fibre within the city. And I'm sure that with an investment of that scale, they'll be looking to maximise the amount of people that will be, renting lines and City and fibre from them going forward. So I don't live in Portsmouth. I just work in Portsmouth, unfortunately, and so I don't see the scale of the advertising and promotion of the system. Although Maria says that that is happening, but certainly as more of the city becomes energised in terms of the City Fibre, I'm sure there'll be a massive ramp up in terms of the promotion and the work they'll do to make sure that service providers rent their line and take that up.
Okay, thank you for that, Mairead. Hi.
Just to come back quickly, I wonder if they've, not that there's anything to do with us, but I wondered if they factored in a lot of people who are in 12, 18-month, 24-month contracts, and they're not likely to come away from their current broadband provider unless they get some help.
I think that's one of the things I wanted to come back to in discussing my own stuff with Mairead. But it's partly down, I think, there's a misunderstanding around some people as to what City Fibre is, which is basically whether it's like Virgin, whereby it's us, or Apple, it's like it's our system, everyone else can go and hang themselves, or whether it's more like a publisher of information, whereby you can provide open access to other broadband providers. And that in itself can then change things. People go, well, I can now have fibre when I didn't have it before, and so can I look at a cheaper deal within their contract? So there's that sort of stuff that could be coming, but it's a fair point. Daniel?
I think getting the City Fibre into the city and increasing that fibre optic provision is really good, especially I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware, but in 2025 there's a thing called Voice over Internet Protocol, which is basically a switch from the copper network that's been used since the 1800s or something ridiculous, and then basically your telephone communications then going to go over the internet. So I think having a City Fibre provision by 2025 is really good. I know my mum is really excited for it. She lives in Havant and she's waiting for it because Virgin is absolutely useless. The other thing I wanted just to comment on really was just the work that they've done. I think it's really good that 70% of the people who work for them live in around about Portsmouth area. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on is that I'm not sure it's really praised that much, but 25% of their workforce are veterans, which I think is fantastic. And I just wanted to commend them on that really. But it'd be interesting to see how many people take this up in the coming years. But I think, if you're on like a really crap network like Virgin, sorry to mention them again, then having City Fibre there as an option is brilliant.
Thank you for the shameless plug, Daniel. Other broadband providers are available, and I'll accept the profanity in the spirit in which it was intended. So thank you very much for that, Daniel. Not just yet, but thank you, George.
Nothing to add at all, Darren. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So hi, you wanted to say something.
I had somebody come to my house and they were saying, did I want City Fibre? And then I was saying I haven't got broadband at the moment. And he was saying, why wasn't I on it? And I said, I fell out with them. But he was saying that he could get me on, and this worried me. All I needed to do was give a different name and he'd get me back onto a system sort of really fast, and he'd done it several times for several people, and I thought, and I couldn't sort of see who he was because I'm visually impaired, but I was thinking, how many people has he got sort of...
I would suggest, my love, if you have a complaint like that, then please refer it through to your local housing team in your area if you have complaints like that.
All right, thank you.
That sounds like a Republican voter fraud to me in South Carolina, but anyway, what do I know? Mairead, a couple of questions from me, if that's all right. A lot of the comments have been around effectively, can I get cheaper broadband prices are going up by 14% this month and all that stuff. you know I'm very keen that people get social tariffs, which are cheaper versions of broadband, and we've discussed this with City Fibre. What is our approach to encourage people to get, to cope with the cost of living crisis by getting cheaper broadband?
Okay, so that the message was taken on board at the Residents' Consortium, and in the winter edition of House Talk, there was a I think it was a half-page advert. There was a half-page editorial comment and text regarding social tariffs and how they could be applied for, etc. So we continue to work with them. But they say we've already placed some stuff in flagship, and I've got my quarterly strategic meeting with them tomorrow, and the item of inclusivity for all and social tariffs is on the agenda. So we'll continue to make sure that City Fibre push their suppliers and their internet providers hard on it. I think the thing we bear in mind is that I liken City Fibre to like a rail network. So City Fibre provides track, and then their internet providers provide all the trains that run on the track, etc. So they're putting in the infrastructure, and then you've got the individual companies that will work with that. But obviously, City Fibre have got a vested interest in making sure that they encourage as many people to come on board their system. And again, I make that commitment to you and the residents that we'll continue to push that as much as we can with them in terms of taking up the uptake.
That's fine. I mean, following from your point, the easy thing to do is to basically do every tenant, right, you're having Vodafone, which is actually at the moment the cheapest brand on the market, which is City Fibre. City Fibre's preferred provider now, regardless of whether you want it or not. And that may be something that's a bit difficult because you're right, various people are in various contracts the last 2-3 years. And I think so the idea of encouraging it is very helpful because we do want to make sure we can tackle the cost of living crisis as far as we can. The other thing is I get complaints from people in my own area about City Fibre, I'll be polite, being suboptimal in terms of things like cutting cables and stuff like that. I don't want that to exist in housing blocks, council housing blocks. What are we doing to try and mitigate and ideally stop that farce?
So I've got a member of staff that is a technical member of staff that is our, for want of a better word, liaison manager with City Fibre. They meet on an operational meeting basis, so at least once a month and sometimes more frequent as new schemes are coming on. They provide us with a detailed plan and installation pack in terms of where the cable's coming into the building, how they're going to be routed, how work's going to be fire stopped, where holes can be drilled, etc. And before any works are undertaken in the block, we sign that off and agree to it, and then we ensure the work's carried out correctly on site, and then we also sign off the work on completion. So we've got quite a detailed quality control working with City Fibre. So their work doesn't compromise anything that we may have done through planned maintenance, etc., etc.
That's really helpful. We don't want cables being cut, which is what I've had local residents in Baffins talking about, I have to say. But with those provisos, which are very welcome, like everyone else, I welcome this report. Like Daniel, I'm delighted that they've got as much local labour as they have, as many veterans as they have. I know from the fantastic work Forgotten Veterans have done with ponds in my own ward, that they are absolutely fantastic when it comes to these sorts of things, and it's an ideal way of using their time and their labour. And so on that basis, I'm happy to note this report's been read. Now, I want to do something that embarrasses politicians, not least me, which is I would like to adjourn this for 10 minutes whilst I use the facilities. So my apologies for that humiliation, but I'm proposing that we restart at 11:31, if that's okay. I think coffees are available from Guildhall Square for everyone else. I'm off to the Boismond. So, could you just turn the...